Chapter 37. What is the medium for sorcery? Chapter 37. What is the medium for sorcery? Where did you learn that step? Ragnar asked bluntly on the 5th iteration of today. Of course, you taught me that. But Ingrid couldn't be that honest. I've attended over 20 training schools. Among them were fraudsters, but there were also many legitimate instructors. Ragnar nodded. As Ingrid moved based on the steps Ragnar had taught, a vibrant expression gradually appeared on Ragnar's face. He was clearly enjoying the moment. Strictly speaking, Ragnar wasn't an excellent teacher. He couldn't be. A genius doesn't look at their own feet. Thus, it's difficult for them to teach the path they've traversed. How can one explain something that simply comes naturally? When he says, swing the sword downward, he assumes the action itself suffices. He doesn't explain the necessary footwork or the shifting of balance in between. In truth, he can't explain it. He was the worst type of person to run a swordsmanship school. Ingrid realized this during the 1st iteration of today. Still, it didn't matter. If the teacher was terrible, the student just had to excel. And in that regard, Ingrid was arguably the best on the continent. Where should my foot go? What direction should the tip point? Do I have to explain even that? It wasn't a tone of reproach, he was genuinely curious. Yes. Ragnar corrected his posture while explaining the direction of the foot and showed his own stance. That stance was the epitome of the basics. Anyone with an eye for talent would drool at the sight. For Ingrid, just observing Ragnar's stance repeatedly was instructional. What about my center of gravity? Yes, shift it at that timing. Ingrid asked, and Ragnar answered. Throughout 12 iterations of today, Ragnar focused solely on teaching Ingrid steps and posture. Footwork and stance come first. Basics follow. Occasionally, you manage a decent swing. Right now, you're not even good enough to chop firewood. If an enemy soldier dies from that last downward swing, thank him 3 times for dying. So, were you dancing just now? Yes, I suppose it was a dance. Holding a sword while doing it might make it a sword dance, but let's not get fancy. Let's call it stick dance. Ragnar delivered sharp remarks in his usual calm tone. Was he always like this? Ingrid wondered. REM had been a far gentler teacher by comparison. Though his occasional comments made Ingrid question his sanity, REM's lessons were still satisfying. Every day felt like breaking out of an egg and being reborn anew. When Ingrid began practicing diagonal slashes, Ragnar explained. The line connecting your opponent and yourself is called the attack line. This line is usually the shortest distance between 2 people and the path your weapon takes when attacking. Blocking the opponent's attack line while extending your own is also fundamental. Do you understand? No, you don't look like you do. Is this that thing? Your mind gets it, but your body won't listen. Let me rephrase. The squad leader only understands with his mouth. Ragnar couldn't teach without throwing barbs. Learn and learn again. 20 iterations of today passed. Then 25. I thought your basics were awful, but at least you know how to use your feet, Ragnar said on the 35th iteration. By this time, Ingrid's behavior had slightly changed. When the mist settled, he no longer died immediately. He dodged the first spear thrust and rushed in before dying. Spears would pierce him like a porcupine. But it was a decent approach. Sometimes, one spear would miss. Why bother pulling the spear back when the target is asking to be killed? It made sense. Facing someone begging to be killed must have been bewildering. When a spear missed, Ingrid would ride for an hour before succumbing to death. That hour was a relentless chain of excruciating pain, a series of unbearable moments. Each time, Ragnar would call out to him. Squad leader. You idiot. Hey. Eventually, when the situation became urgent, Ragnar would just yell, hey. Ingrid filled each iteration of today with determination. Your stance is better than expected. Step by step, he improved. Each time he changed, Ragnar furrowed his brow. Until yesterday, you were clearly. He would murmur things like that. Where did you learn all this? Around the 100th iteration of today, Ragnar asked. Who are you? Ingrid gave him a puzzled look. Up until yesterday, you were a mess. How did you improve so much in a single day? Magic. Ragnar was surprised, and Ingrid burst into laughter at his reaction. Why? Surprised I'm better than you expected. It's more than that. I'm starting to wonder if you're really the squad leader. Ragnar's skepticism was evident. This squad was full of troublemakers, and Ragnar himself was eccentric to say the least. So, will you stop teaching me? No. Ragnar resumed reluctantly. After that, they began practicing with imaginary sparring partners, swinging their swords. The concept of the attack line, proper grip, and using a sword defensively were covered. If the sword is of high quality, you can block with the flat side. Otherwise, block with the edge. Slashing, thrusting, cutting, these three are the basics. Your footwork and posture aren't bad, so focus on these fundamental techniques. Ragnar's steps were numerous, advancing, passing, closing in, evading, circling sideways, turning back, and making wide turns. Memorizing them alone was overwhelming, but through repetition, they started to stick. Even for someone slow to learn, having such a high-level instructor dedicated to teaching 1:1 improved Ingrid's skills. What seemed minor to a genius brought Ingrid immense joy. Visualize your opponent in your mind. Then swing your sword. Clang! Through countless iterations, Ingrid continued learning. Diagonal slashes, blade binds, twisting strikes, slicing cuts, horizontal overhead slashes, side glances, crown strikes, counters, half-swording, parrying, deflections, continuous strikes, closing in, and drawing cuts. As time passed, Ragnar's sharp remarks diminished. You're better than I thought. Where did you learn that binding technique? One of my previous instructors drilled it into me. Excellent. Ragnar was pleased. The same method was applied to other techniques. Previously, every instructor told me my horizontal overhead slash was a mess. If you're going to teach swordsmanship, maybe start with that. It feels like you've already decided what to learn. Not exactly. Shrugging, Ingrid prompted Ragnar to conduct a short test. And soon enough, Ragnar followed his suggestions. Let's do that. Ragnar, oblivious as ever, would unknowingly teach Ingrid the same thing over and over, only to dismiss it as sufficient and move on. Each time, Ingrid advanced to the next lesson. Under the blazing sun, their endless practice left them drenched in sweat. For some, such repetition would be mind-numbingly tedious, but not for Ingrid. When the 200th day of this routine had passed. Upon opening his eyes, Ingrid saw a black river. What was going on? A boatman came into view. Though his lips didn't move, his voice resonated clearly. Are you insane? Coming here to die over and over again? You foolish creature. The boatman's tone was calm, but his words were far from it. Before Ingrid could respond, he woke from the dream. Another familiar day awaited him. Ingrid lay still, eyes open, lost in thought. Did you have a wet dream or something? What's wrong with you? Beside him, REM made a remark that sounded like a playful growl. Ignoring him, Ingrid rose from where he lay. Let's just assume he wanted to call me crazy. Even if Ingrid wanted to ask why, there was no way to pose the question. Some problems are pointless to dwell on, answers won't come no matter how hard you think. Ingrid stood and asked, do you know anything about sorcery? At the mention of sorcery, REM turned sharply. Sorcery? If you know something, share it. Whenever fog gathered, REM would occasionally make cryptic comments related to sorcery. He must know something. Up until now, Ingrid had been too preoccupied mastering the basics of swordsmanship, but now he had some breathing room. His training had become second nature. Even Ragnar, who often watched, couldn't help but be amazed at how much he had improved. Though Ingrid hadn't tested his skills in actual combat yet, he felt confident that he was far better than before. Sorcery is sorcery, what else would it be? Explain what you know. It might be interesting. It was rare for Ingrid to initiate a conversation like this, prompting a grin from REM. What's got you curious all of a sudden? Fine. I'll keep it simple. Do you know the difference between magic and sorcery? Magic's more common. While rare, magic users could still be found here and there. But sorcery? Despite wandering across the continent, Ingrid had never encountered a sorcerer. That's how scarce they were. Not wrong, but not entirely right either. REM casually tidied up his bedding, tossing his rolled-up blanket aside, slipped on his boots, and stepped outside. Ingrid followed him. The day outside was the same as any other. Yet, Encrid never found it tiresome. Every day was a delight in its own way. As they walked, REM continued, sorcery needs a medium. Sure, magic sometimes uses conduits, but for sorcery, the offering or medium is incredibly important. Without it, nothing starts. Did your tribe use sorcery? REM hailed from the western frontier. That region had become a settlement after the Central Continent Empire's victorious war, over a century ago. Before that, it had been the land of indigenous tribes. Although people still referred to them as barbarians in disdain, the general understanding was that sorcery originated from the West. That was common knowledge. I've seen it a few times. But true sorcerers? There aren't many. Most of the ones wandering the continent are just tricksters, peddling false sorcery. If REM said so, it must be true. Encrid nodded and turned to his routine tasks. Where are you going? Training. He headed off to meet Ragnar to continue refining the basics. By the 250th day of their repetitive practice, Ragnar remarked, "Were your fundamentals always this solid?" Ragnar's red eyes widened as he brushed his golden hair aside. "From the looks of it, you seem to have made the longsword your primary weapon." That sounded about right. This sword had been his tool throughout the training. Though it felt awkward at first, it had become second nature after countless repetitions. A familiarity born from unrelenting practice. "It's time to test your skills in real combat," Ragnar said after their session. Encrid nodded, acknowledging the suggestion. "Why are you still hanging around?" "They're calling for us," REM shouted. On their way back, Encrid grabbed some bread from Kreis and chewed on it, dipping the hard loaf in water before forcing it down, followed by jerky. He checked his gear, then marched to the battlefield. The longsword he'd swapped with Ragnar swung lightly at his side. "Didn't you pay a lot for your old sword?" REM asked. "This one feels better. I've seen plenty of men switch weapons and meet their end soon after." Was that a curse or a warning? "Mind your own business." Exhaling deeply, Encrid steeled himself. While the heart of the beast granted courage, he couldn't rely on it alone. If this was to be real combat, it should serve as preparation for tomorrow. Before the enemy came into view, Encrid reflected on REM's earlier explanation. Sorcery requires a medium, and that medium is crucial. If the enemy lingered in the tall grass for concealment rather than ambush, was it because they were hiding something? Encrid had already caught a glimpse, flags and poles. When they set one tent on fire, the enemy didn't prioritize killing the intruders but rushed to extinguish the flames. Soon, the enemy came into view. Nearby, a spear-wielding soldier from the 3rd Squad muttered with a frown, "What's with their formation?" A formation clustered around flagpoles offered no tactical advantage. Its significance was likely sorcerous. 6 flags and poles rose above the enemy. The mediums of their sorcery. Mist spread, obscuring their vision. Well then, let's see how it feels to navigate the sorcerous fog. Encrid's ears twitched. Time to let the keen hearing he honed from Jackson take over for his eyes. Chapter 38, The Flag Flutters and Soldiers Dance with Swords, 1. Chapter 38, The Flag Flutters and Soldiers Dance with Swords, 1. Do you really have to learn swordsmanship? Ragnar had once asked this. His tone was sharp, dripping with sarcasm. It was his way of saying his body wasn't up to the task, and he was right. Encrid wasn't born with talent. His body was clumsy, and he survived on sheer determination and effort. Even so, he had spent countless hours learning swordsmanship, meeting numerous instructors, and pondering techniques on his own. This had made his thinking flexible and his adaptability exceptional. While learning something new was challenging, once he grasped it and entered real combat, the story changed. In truth, he did possess a kind of innate talent. Flexibility and adaptability, those were Encrid's strengths. Just use whatever works, however it works, whenever it's needed. By the standards of the Norillia Kingdom, his skills were at best intermediate or slightly above. In the mercenary world, he was also at an intermediate level. Wherever he went, his abilities would be considered average. That was the current state of Encrid's skills. But his prowess in real combat was exceptional, independent of his skill level. Having lived a life constrained by limited talent, Encrid had learned to make the most of what he had. A soldier's spearhead came flying toward him. His sharpened ears caught the faint sound of the air being pierced. Though his sight wasn't perfectly precise, he discerned the direction. He mentally mapped out the opponent's movement. A step to the side. Ingrid moved his feet. The heart of the beast lent him boldness. With his left heel pressing down and his right foot retreating, he spun his body. The spearhead zipped past him with a sharp whistle, missing him by a hair. Even as spearheads emerged suddenly from the mist, Ingrid didn't falter. There was no need. He had already dodged that exact attack hundreds of times. By now, he'd evaded that first thrust more than 200 times in practice. Instead of drawing his sword, Ingrid grabbed the middle of the spear shaft and yanked it toward him. The enemy soldier, caught off guard, gasped in surprise. Who? As the soldier's head emerged from the mist, Ingrid seized it and twisted. Crack! The soldier's neck snapped. A broken neck meant certain death. The lifeless soldier crumpled to the ground, and Ingrid picked up his spear. He envisioned the enemy formation in his mind, recalling their positions before the mist had spread. They were all clustered together. No matter where I throw this, it'll hit someone. With a firm stomp of his left foot, he hurled the spear with all his might. The spear sliced through the air and struck something with a dull thud. Gah! A death rattle echoed. What was that? Damn it! The shouts of the startled enemy soldiers followed. Listening closely, Ingrid crouched low and charged forward. Even if the enemy had the ability to see through the mist, spotting someone darting low to the ground would be difficult. Thud, thud, thud. Quarrels and arrows whizzed overhead. Ah! Ugh! Damn it, arrows! From behind, the cries and curses of his allies rang out. His hair should have stood on end, but it didn't. This was familiar territory. The real problem was the lack of tension. Ingrid closed the distance and drew his long sword. Using his hearing, he judged the distance precisely. Tring! With his sword in both hands, he swung it, altering the horizontal slash into a downward one. The original move was designed to block an opponent's blade and counterattack. But Ingrid, as always, adapted it to suit his needs. The stance was similar, but he shifted his grip to a thumb-up position, holding the blade at head level parallel to the ground. This turned what was meant to be an upper body horizontal slash into a low, horizontal sweep. Though the stance was unconventional, and the power of the swing was diminished, the unexpected strike caught the enemy off guard. Swish! Thud! Thwack! The blade met resistance. Ugh! What's happening? It's the ground. So they noticed quickly. Breaking through the mist, Ingrid leaped upward, finally catching sight of the enemy soldiers. Though his field of vision was limited to the reach of his blade, even that was enough. He could see the enemy, their weapons, and his own sword. The situation had shifted. 3 soldiers with bleeding shins limped, their legs slashed. All 3 were armed with crossbows. One gritted his teeth and raised his crossbow. Ingrid sidestepped diagonally forward with his left foot, his right following in quick succession. Thwip! The quarrel pierced the air where he had been. Ingrid didn't stop at dodging. He brought his longsword down in a heavy overhand strike. The crossbowman instinctively drew a short sword, crossing it with the longsword to block. But Ingrid pressed down with brute strength. Clang! The short sword gave way, its tip denting the soldier's leather helmet and crushing his skull beneath. It wasn't a clean cut but a brutal smash. Crunch! Foaming blood spurted from the shattered head as the soldier toppled backward. Red curtains of blood streamed down his face through the dented helmet. Ugh! The mortally wounded soldier slumped, his eyes glazing over. Ingrid recovered his blade and sidestepped, moving just as another soldier's spear hurtled toward where he had stood. The spear grazed his left side, tearing his cloth armor slightly, that was all. Dodging, he swung his sword, slowly rather than quickly. The spearman reflexively drew back, attempting to block with the shaft. Clunk! Blade met shaft. The sword slid down the spear's length as Ingrid advanced. With a binding motion, he followed up with a slash. Scrape, scrape, scrape! The sound of the spear shaft being carved echoed. Thud! The blade pierced the soldier's chest, shredding flesh and shattering bone. Ingrid withdrew the blade, and blood gushed forth. Blood sprayed onto his chest. Crouching slightly, he straightened his posture. Until now, he had only mastered the basics. It had been a time of shedding bad habits and building a new foundation. Truthfully, he had just barely regained his former level. However, having honed his swordsmanship with the fundamentals of Valence-style mercenary swordplay, he was in a league of his own. It was like giving wings to a lion. Incrid's flexible thinking produced results that exceeded his abilities. Amid the remaining soldiers, his blood-soaked blade danced silently. Incrid performed his deadly sword dance. Damn it! The battalion commander of Norilia thought he was trapped in a nightmare. They've outmaneuvered us. If the enemy had prepared for this, so had they. But losing their entire force here meant all preparations would be for naught. Retreat! Retreat! Cries to fall back echoed from all directions. The battalion commander was far from composed. Gah! Even as their troops retreated, quarrels rained down from behind. Damn crossbow units! A sense of dread overtook him. It was astounding how they'd managed to hide such a number of crossbows. But where? The reconnaissance reports had already hinted at the answer. The tall grasslands. Now wasn't the time for idle thoughts. The commander's mind tried to escape reality. Get it together. Regroup. Two competent company commanders attempted to rally the troops, but the enemy was no ordinary force. The unit harrying them from behind was the Greyhounds, a fiercely independent company of Aspen Duchy. The commander realized they had been utterly outmaneuvered. He fought desperately to regain his composure. It's the mist of massacre. Aspen deployed a sorcerer. Those bastards. How do we dispel the fog? Few of his aides had answers. Bring me someone who knows. Visibility was nearly zero, and their troops were being pummeled on both sides. At this rate, they would be annihilated. No, annihilation was inevitable. Soon, an aide returned with an answer. We must destroy the medium of the spell. The medium? The banners. Charge for the banners. The commander shouted. We don't know where they are, the aide responded bleakly. The enemy's initial positions had shifted like clockwork gears, spinning in circles, making it impossible to pinpoint their location. The commander couldn't erase the word annihilation from his mind. While he struggled in anguish, the Fairy Company commander in charge of the 4th Company realized the enemy wouldn't let them retreat so easily. She was right, and it was not good news. Without a reversal, we're all dead. She thought the battlefield needed a new wind, but no such wind blew. The battle ended in a crushing defeat. Barely escaping death, the Fairy Company commander survived. As she fled, the fog dissipated. Their forces were annihilated. Fewer than 50 allies survived. Clang! Incrid had fought valiantly, exceptionally, in fact, and he was satisfied. Though their forces were nearly wiped out, he alone had felled close to 20 soldiers. Blood dripped from his hand gripping the sword. A gash on his forearm from earlier left him weak. I can't muster any strength. He had spent all his time mastering the basics. Ragnar had told him not to spar recklessly until his bad habits were corrected, until he was fully ready. And then, almost as an afterthought, Ragnar had said, though this isn't exactly battlefield advice. Even Ragnar must have realized how absurd that sounded. Avoid fighting to fix bad habits in the middle of a battlefield? That was as good as telling him to die quietly. But Incrid managed it. Instead of simply surrendering his life, he excluded death from the equation. And today, for the first time, he showcased his skills in real combat. It's different. Until now, he'd fought using mercenary swordsmanship and whatever means necessary to survive. That part hadn't changed. What had changed was the swordsmanship at the core of his technique. I want to learn more. His hunger for mastery surged. He couldn't settle for just the basics. Having single-handedly decimated 2 squads, Incrid stood his ground. The enemy hesitated to approach. For some reason, holding his position allowed Incrid a clearer view. The sorcerer's fog no longer obstructed him. He saw the enemy forming a semicircle before him. Each one held a crossbow. Fight me like a man, one-on-one, Incrid taunted, eager to test his skill once more. You lunatic, muttered someone who seemed to be the enemy squad leader. Twang! The crossbows sang, and quarrels pierced his body. A bolt embedded in his eye brought searing pain. It hurts. Yet he felt a strange satisfaction. As death loomed, Incrid recalled his purpose amidst this endless cycle of combat. Ragnar had always emphasized the fundamentals. Train and train again. Fight for your life, And eventually, well, someday it'll stick. It was an irresponsible statement, yet it held meaning. Ingrid needed more real combat experience. Death's shadow loomed over him. In his final moments, an enemy soldier looked down at him and said, "What a tenacious bastard." Even then, Ingrid's grip on his sword remained firm. His blood pooled beneath him. No matter what, even if you're dying, never let go of your sword. That's rule number 1. Countless instructors had said it. Ragnar said it. REM had said it. And Ingrid obeyed. Spit! An enemy soldier, enraged over his fallen comrades, spat on Ingrid's face. And that was the end. Morning came. Another new day began. Ingrid reflected on what he had gained from yesterday's battle. I need more real combat experience. That was his conclusion. He sought out Ragnar once again for guidance. Your basics are solid, but you fight like someone who's spent their whole life training alone. Where did you learn swordsmanship? It was true, as Ingrid had also realized. What he needed now was actual combat. Here and there. Here and there? Fine, let's go with that. Anyway, it's better to train until your body naturally remembers the moves. And whoever your teacher was, they did a great job. That teacher was you. Ragnar unknowingly praised himself. Ingrid simply nodded and devoted himself to sparring. And oh, how he enjoyed it. Through repeated battles, Ingrid eventually cut down 30 soldiers on his own. It wasn't pure skill alone, arrows and bolts rained down constantly. He dodged them, weaving through chaos. Again and again, the days repeated. And he swung his sword once more. Eventually, the so-called basics became a perfect, seamless part of him. When it comes to fundamentals, there's nothing more I can teach you. Even Ragnar admitted as much, acknowledging Ingrid's remarkable progress. Chapter 39, The Flag Flutters and Soldiers Dance with Swords, 2. Chapter 39, The Flag Flutters and Soldiers Dance with Swords, 2. Eyes, feet, hands. Ragnar said. Start with your eyes, move with your feet, and finish with your hands. The sword. Following those words, Ingrid did just that. By seeing with his eyes, he predicted his opponent's movements, moved with his feet to adjust his position, and let the sword finish the attack. HMPH. In the next battle, Ingrid put that into practice himself. Instead of merely dodging by sight, he predicted and dodged, so his opponent's strike missed its mark and Ingrid's own attack landed. The sword's thrust was merely a confirmation of the attack's success. Thud! The sword pierced through the opponent's throat. With a swift motion, Ingrid pulled the sword out and blood poured out as muscles, nerves, and blood vessels were severed. Immediately after killing the opponent, Ingrid rolled to the ground and struck the shin of another soldier with his pommel. Crack! Since he wasn't wearing any additional protection, the bone was bound to break. Ooh! The man fell, squirming. Ingrid pulled out a quarrel from his side and thrust it into the soldier's heart. The armor caused the arrow to sink only halfway in. As he stood, Ingrid pressed it down with his foot. Thud, the sound echoed as the quarrel lodged completely in. Ingrid lifted the dead soldier with one hand and tilted him to the side. Thunk, bolts got embedded in the corpse. But Ingrid made a small mistake here. A bolt grazed his thigh with a flick. If his mobility decreased, it would be harder to fight amidst the enemy. Still, he pushed on as far as he could. 32. He had killed 2 more in one day, despite a mistake in between. Eyes, feet, hands. Predicting with his eyes, moving with his feet, and finishing with his hands, it seemed like it would be good to practice this in real combat a few more times. Ingrid continued, and through today's repetition, he had more or less figured out the enemy's movements. They defend the flag. They circled one side. If he charged straight ahead one day, he would rush to the left the next. He had never broken the flag, but he had come dangerously close. Ingrid felt thirst. He felt something was missing. Can I not do this alone? If that were the case, he could bring along Rem or Ragnar, but a sense of stubbornness arose in him. He had learned proper swordsmanship, had honed it. He wanted to take a step further. It wasn't impatience, but the thought that it was time to move forward kept repeating in his mind. I'll try. If this was driven by stubbornness, he could reconsider later. Ingrid had the opportunity to keep going, thanks to today's repetition. Who are you? After several battles, Ingrid came face to face with an enemy squad leader. It was a face he didn't recognize. The man had a rat-like beard. "What do you think?" Ingrid chuckled and answered. Facing death, there was no room for fear. The rat-like bastard of the Aspen Duchy swallowed his saliva and thrust his spear. "You're a troublesome one." After dying and waking up, it was time for training again. Complete recovery and fast recovery. Once the concepts of eyes, feet, and hands became familiar, Ragnar moved on to the next step. What had started as getting used to the basics had somehow evolved into understanding the history and concepts of swordsmanship. Luckily, the squad leader and I share the same teachings. It was obvious, Ragnar had taught him. I followed the techniques of one of the best instructors. I must have been really lucky. Ingrid spoke words that didn't seem quite right, but Ragnar had no reason not to believe him. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. It was understandable that his skills had improved in a day. He had trained the basics on his own but hadn't known how to apply them, so this could happen. Of course, this was a very unusual case, but if you didn't care about it, it was no big deal. The basics of the Northern-style longsword had settled in his body, just like moving forward in a concept. What good would it do to analyze it? The squad leader had never questioned his past. Therefore, he had to do the same. Do you know? Complete recovery and fast recovery. At Ragnar's words, Ingrid nodded. Complete recovery and fast recovery. The concepts of proper sword, heavy sword, swinging sword, fast sword, and soft sword. To explain it further. A perfect, precise sword. A heavy, forceful sword. A mesmerizing, swinging sword. A fast, quicker sword. A soft, flowing sword. 500 years ago, a peerless genius was born. He was from a small farm, and he was truly a genius among geniuses. This genius killed a band of marauders who had attacked his farm with nothing but a wooden stick when he was just 9 years old. At just 9 years old, he killed 12 adult bandits, armed with swords. This is swordsmanship. The 9-year-old child was precocious. It was said that he had lost his parents when he was young. Seeing the bandits wielding swords, the boy realized the principles of swordsmanship. Later, a nobleman who heard of the boy killing 12 bandits with a wooden stick went to find him. He adopted the boy as his own. Thus, the boy took the family name Oniak. Leonasis Oniak. The genius gained his name in this way. Leonasis had the talent bestowed by the heavens, but he also had the misfortune of an unfortunate body. When he was around 10 years old, he contracted a disease that caused his limbs to lose strength. It was an incurable disease that no mage, doctor, or healer on the continent could treat. By the time he was 12, his entire body was paralyzed. Despite his illness, the Oniak family did not abandon Leonasis. The unfortunate genius was almost forgotten. But when Leonasis turned 20, he left his mark on the continent's swordsmanship history, paralyzed. He compiled all the sword styles of his time into 5 categories, creating a new school of swordsmanship. That was the foundation of complete recovery and fast recovery. Proper sword, heavy sword, swinging sword, fast sword, and soft sword. Despite being unable to move his body, he reshaped the history of swordsmanship. This is also how Oniak became the most powerful family in the empire. The swordsmanship school Leonasis founded was passed down through generations and became the standard. Today, it is divided into 5 styles: the Northern style long sword, the Central style proper sword and soft sword, the Western style fast sword, the Southern style swinging sword, and the Eastern style technique sword. The continent was divided into 5 parts, and the development of weapon skills differed in each region. To use the Northern style long sword, I have developed a technique. It will be more useful than the beast's guts or whatever. It was yet another sunny and windy day. On this day, Ingrid learned a new technique from Ragnar. REM had taught him the heart of a beast. Jackson had taught him how to listen. And Ragnar taught him the importance of focus. The principle is simple. Forget everything around you and focus on the opponent with your eyes, focusing solely on what you're doing. Don't let anything else enter your vision. The explanation was all over the place. The basics of the longsword are grounded in the fundamentals. It's the sword that breaks even when blocked, the sword that cannot be avoided even when known, and the sword that pours all its power into a single strike. That's what it is. Focus and do it. If you could do it with focus, what would happen to those who couldn't? I'll teach you a bit of the trick. With those words, Ragnar's sword became a beam of light. Even after switching to a different sword, it hadn't even fully become familiar in his hands, yet the blade was invisible. The arm, which whipped like a whip, couldn't even be seen. It was just a flash, and something passed by Ingrid's neck. The blade brushed against the nape of the neck. It was so fast that the realization came only after the neck was cut. The back of the neck became warm. Blood trickled down. "Are you bullying the captain, you bastard?" REM appeared out of nowhere and glared. Ingrid placed his hand on his neck. "I almost died." It was that dangerous of a strike. The invisible speed had sliced through the skin. They say that in the moment of death, humans become dozens of times more focused. "I'm just helping." "You crazy bastard, what use is learning that kind of skill after you're dead? You must not know the squad leader. Learning the heart of the beast took a really, really long time." "Who? Why emphasize the strange part? Isn't really, really too long?" Before Ingrid could respond, Ragnar snorted. "It's because the teacher was bad." "Who? What did you say? You want me to stick an axe in your head?" REM raised one hand and placed it behind his ear as he spoke. "I'm not an ignorant barbarian. My training methods are rational." "Rational, huh?" Ingrid pondered the meaning of the word. Both REM and Ragnar were the same to him. "But aren't you from an extreme northern ethnic group, basically a barbarian?" Ragnar's skin was pale, and his eyes were red, characteristics of northern peoples. "Don't lump us with the Western barbarians. It's unpleasant. Very unpleasant." "Fine, just die then. After you're dead, I'll personally go to the north and bury you." It seemed like another argument was brewing, but Ingrid intervened. "You know what I'm going to say, right?" Even as he interrupted, Ragnar cast a glance beyond Ingrid. "I know the squad leader is as slow as a northern ox, but I didn't know he had this much basic skill." "What's this?" "Stop dodging and answer me. I'll stick an axe in your head. You crazy barbarian bastard." The northern ox minimizes its movements to withstand the cold. It's a metaphor used for describing slow humans. Ingrid had been called slow countless times, but there was nothing unfair about it. "You're supposed to teach me the trick." Ingrid held Ragnar back with words and turned his head toward REM. No words were needed. A simple look was enough. REM huffed, and when he noticed Ingrid staring at him, he snorted and shouted. "We were told to gather." Then he turned around and strode toward the barracks. "We should go back." Seeing that, Ragnar spoke. As he tried to retrieve his sword, Ingrid grabbed his wrist. "What about the trick?" The thirst for learning was what moved Ingrid. And now, wasn't he in a position to be taught something new? A single point of focus. Concentrate, it was a technique that Ragnar had improved from an ancient method. Ingrid felt a surge of desire. It won't be easy. The basics weren't easy. Adjusting your posture, learning new steps, abandoning what you had, and relearning how to strike and thrust. None of it was easy. Even so, it was enjoyable. A joy followed. The pleasure of growing each day filled his entire being. He had dreamed of becoming a knight, but perhaps it was just because he loved the sword that he had come this far. When he held the sword and swung it, Ingrid was so lost in the joy that he forgot everything else. As he held Ragnar's wrist, Ragnar spoke flatly. "You'll have to face death. When you think you're going to die, your nerves will become razor sharp. You have to repeatedly experience that sharpness." It was similar to when he had learned the heart of the beast. However, while the heart of the beast sought boldness even in the face of death, the technique Ragnar spoke of, the one-point concentration, was the opposite. You had to fight desperately to avoid death. The fear of death would sharpen your nerves like needles. "Let's practice alongside real combat." Ingrid made a plan in his mind and moved. "Just learning the trick won't be enough. Once you learn, let me know how it feels." "It feels like everything around you disappears, and the sword moves as you wish." Ragnar answered calmly. Ingrid looked at Ragnar's red eyes. For the first time, he saw a seriousness in them. What's got into him all of a sudden? Ragnar was unpredictable, but this was the first time he had shown such passion. Hidden passion, burning deep within his eyes, Ragnar spoke. "It's time to go." Ingrid nodded. "Let's go." The battle began again, and mist filled the air. Sorcery? You bastards! REM shouted in anger. Lower your posture. Ragnar shouted at Ingrid, who was charging forward. Before, he would have been busy stopping them, but not now. Now, he knew he wouldn't be caught off guard by some clumsy soldier. Ingrid ran forward, once again facing enemy soldiers with his eyes, feet, and hands in perfect sequence. Start with the crossbow squad. The difference now was that after repeating so many days, he had become familiar with the enemy formation. Well, to be precise, it wasn't that he recognized it with his eyes. He had naturally memorized it. Before the first enemy could thrust his spear, Ingrid closed the gap and thrust his dagger upward. With a sharp thrust, the dagger pierced the chin and roof of the enemy's mouth. He discarded the dagger and pushed the fallen enemy aside with his shoulder. Ha! Ooh! The pushed enemy was caught off guard. Taking advantage of that opening, Ingrid threw 2 daggers. The daggers flew through the air, taking out 2 enemies by the neck. It was a masterful display. He then drew his longsword and executed a diagonal slash. Clang! A spear's shaft blocked the blow. Expecting it to be blocked, he used the rebound force to retrieve his sword and cut the enemy's neck on the other side. Swish! The well-sharpened blade cleanly sliced through the enemy's neck. Once again, it was a fight. Another battle. The same repeated today. He fought again and again, and again, people died. And Ingrid fought desperately. The moment he learned the trick, he understood. It wasn't about boldly facing death, it was about desperately fighting to stay alive. That was the key. Ultimately, death couldn't be avoided. But that was okay. He would get what he wanted, no matter what. Of course, amidst it all, there would be things he had to do. The flag. He had to attack the flag, the medium of the sorcery. Adding a goal to real combat. Ingrid rushed forward. Through repeated todays, Ingrid had come to understand the movements of the enemy soldiers. The enemy soldiers, trusting the mist, were thrown off by a single surprise attack. Ingrid made full use of that. Chapter 40, The Flag Flutters and Soldiers Dance with Swords, 3. Chapter 40, The Flag Flutters and Soldiers Dance with Swords, 3. Each day began with a lesson from Ragnar, focusing on a single point of concentration, followed by plunging into live combat. This had become Ingrid's routine, repeated endlessly. Countless repetitions. Despite teetering on the edge of death repeatedly, the technique called a single point of concentration always seemed within reach yet just out of grasp. Don't rush. Ingrid shifted his mindset. Let's start by breaking the flagpole. As the battle resumed, Ingrid pondered ways to minimize losses. Thinking and strategizing, these were among his greatest strengths. Once again, the mist rolled in, deathly mist. Appropriately named the Mist of Massacre. Of course, Ingrid didn't know the name of the spell. He only recognized that succumbing to it wasn't an option. When the mist enveloped them and before REM could shout anything, Ingrid's voice rang out first. Get down! The warning caught everyone off guard. Even the squad leaders instinctively lowered his head. Shields up! When Ingrid shouted again, his allies reflexively raised their shields. Feeling vulnerable without one, he grabbed a shield for himself. Running low to the ground, he angled the shield diagonally. A volley of bolts and arrows thudded into its surface with sharp thunks. The oil-soaked shield performed its job admirably. I should have grabbed a shield sooner. In past battles, he'd started fights after being struck by arrows or bolts while charging forward. But those experiences had also taught him how to navigate while dodging projectiles. Thinking as he ran, Ingrid knew from experience that escaping the mist's influence required closing the distance with the enemy. And so, he pressed on. Suddenly, he sprang to his left, narrowly dodging spear thrusts aimed at where he had been just moments ago. Whoosh! Whoosh! The spears sliced through empty air. He had memorized this pattern. Facing death intentionally just to execute the single-point focus was pointless. He decided instead to fight with every ounce of his being. After dodging the spears, Ingrid rushed forward until he was almost nose-to-nose with the enemy. It was only then that he could make out the figures through the mist. A soldier, face full of shock, peered out from beneath his rounded leather helmet. Ingrid kicked the soldier's ankle. Ah! The man lost balance and fell. Ingrid smashed the edge of his shield against the man's head. Crunch! The sound of wood splintering rang out. If the soldier survived that blow, it would be sheer luck. Passing by the fallen man, Ingrid drew his long sword. As he unsheathed it, he swung wide, startling 3 or 4 nearby enemies trying to close in. Watching them flinch, Ingrid mapped his next route in his mind. This was his reality, repeated daily for over 300 days. He could navigate the terrain blindfolded, knowing the positions of the flagpoles and enemy formations. To the enemy, Ingrid's movements likely appeared ghostly. Ron, a soldier of the Grand Duchy of Aspen, was caught off guard by the movements of an Aurelian soldier who charged forward as soon as the mist descended. Appearing suddenly from the left, the soldier cut down 3 or 4 of Ron's comrades before disappearing. No, it wasn't vanishing. Upon closer inspection, the enemy was merely crouching low. Ugh! Below us! Watch your feet! Ron knew the mist surrounding them was a spell or magic. While it didn't obscure the vision of their allies, thicker patches of mist did obstruct certain areas, like the ground. In other words, while everything above chest height was clear, the floor was hidden. The enemy seemed to exploit this advantage with precision. Kill him! Damn it! The chaos was palpable. The enemy moved as if they had 10 bodies. Ron tightened his grip, ready to strike the moment the enemy appeared within range. The tension was suffocating. Ah! Gah! There he is! The soldier roamed the misty ground as if it were his domain. Ron swallowed hard, his throat dry. He half expected a blade to appear before him any second. He even felt the urge to relieve himself. But the enemy still hadn't shown up. Just as the tension reached its peak. "He's breaking the flagpole!" A scream erupted from behind. Ron whipped his head around. The squad leader was collapsing forward, and next to him, the enemy rose, parting the mist like a skeleton warrior emerging from the grave. Was he alone? Could one person have caused this much havoc amidst the mist? The enemy gripped his sword with both hands and swung at the flagpole. Thwack! The flagpole snapped in two with a heavy blow, and the banner toppled to the ground. The fabric, once flapping noisily in the wind, now lay silent and still. A puff of dust rose as the flag hit the ground. Through the dust, the enemy appeared to tilt his head as if in curiosity. At least, that's how Ron perceived it. Then the enemy moved again. Kill him! Kill him now! Someone clung to the enemy's leg, sacrificing themselves to hold him back. It was a noble, selfless act befitting Aspen's elite troops. The others swarmed him like bees. With 2 spears impaled into his left side and 5 quarrels lodged in his thigh, the soldier bled profusely but managed to ask, "Why hasn't the mist dissipated? Isn't the flag its medium?" The squad leader's deputy scoffed in response, taking the fallen leader's place. "Idiot, do you think there's only one flag? There are 6 decoys, and only one is real." The deputy didn't mince words, knowing the enemy was as good as dead. So 5 were fakes, and only one was genuine. Who? Crazy bastard. Why is this single-point focus so difficult? Then again, nothing's ever been easy. What nonsense are you rambling about? Focus, focus. Lunatic. Crack. Ron couldn't hold back any longer and swung his spear at the enemy's head. The blow landed, splitting the head open and splattering blood. The soldier convulsed on the ground, spitting blood foam. Gah! Turning away from the dying man, Ron moved on. This one soldier had disrupted an entire flag unit from completing their mission, but the outcome of the battle was already decided. The Grand Duchy of Aspen was victorious. With the mist in play, defeat was impossible. Pain flooded his body as death approached. To escape the agony, Ingrid drifted into thought. How did I learn Heart of the Beast again? The heart of the beast was honed by rolling across the battlefield on the brink of death. But the single-point focus still eluded him. Is the boldness granted by the heart of the beast getting in the way? No, that didn't seem to be the issue. Had it been easy, Ingrid would have been deemed exceptionally talented. Though it might have frustrated others, Ingrid remained calm. There was no need for impatience. If it doesn't work, I'll keep trying until it does. Resolute and steadfast, despair and frustration were foreign to him. Death came, and morning followed. He awakened to sunlight and wind, preparing himself anew. It's called single-point focus. Will you learn it? Ragnar's teaching continued like clockwork, and Ingrid nodded each time. No matter how much he learned, he couldn't fully grasp it. Using the Northern-style longsword, he refined its fundamentals under Ragnar's guidance, gaining small insights along the way. One such realization: everything must be learned properly from the beginning. Does fear of death heighten awareness? No matter how hard he tried, it still felt like wearing ill-fitting clothes. That's when he asked, "How did you learn it?" "I just did," Ragnar replied kindly. That made him even more annoying. Why be kind now? It felt better when he was spitting sharp words. Just like that. Yes, I forgot everything around me, focused, and became one with the sword. It wasn't a boast. His tone was calm and composed. Is that so? Yes, it is. What seemed trivial to Ragnar felt like an unreachable star to Ingrid. Still, jealousy or envy didn't rise. If his spirit was fragile enough to break over this, he wouldn't have dreamed of becoming a knight in the first place. They repeated the same exercise over and over. Ragnar, stopping his sword inches from Ingrid's face, tried to make him feel the fear of death. In terms of sheer speed, Ragnar seemed faster than Rem. When watching them duel, Rem appeared quicker. That duel between them was still vivid in Ingrid's mind. But facing him firsthand, Ragnar felt undeniably faster. What are you doing? The battle's calling. What about you? Using the squad leader as a practice dummy because you're still mad about losing to me last time. Who's losing? Your thick skull. Why did these two always fight the moment they met? Let's just go. Once again, it was the battlefield. Ingrid had learned much through brushes with death. One thing was clear: out of 6 flags, 5 were false. It's all about making the right choice. It was time to test his luck. This time, he charged toward the enemy before the mist even rose. Squad leader? Ragnar's startled voice came from behind. To anyone watching, his actions must have seemed absurd. The squad leaders lost it. Even Rem shouted. The others muttered, wondering what had come over him. At that moment, the mist rolled in. What? I can't see. Ingrid shouted as he ran. Get down. Shields up. He expected them to follow his command instinctively, just like before. But the outcome was different this time. The Allied response was delayed. Arrows and bolts rained down, tearing through their ranks. Enemy soldiers armed with spears closed in, thrusting at the panicked Allies. Why? It was a matter of timing. He had to allow them a moment to catch their breath after their initial shock. He already knew this mistake all too well. It was fine. He'd do better next time. Others might joke that Lady Luck had kissed him or handed him a sack full of coins. But Ingrid knew himself well. He wasn't particularly lucky. The second flag required an intense battle. Even without achieving perfect focus, his skills improved as real combat layered over his newly acquired basics. Still a long way to go. For Ingrid, the standard was always Rem and Ragnar. It took 3 grueling days to take down the second banner. When he finally broke it, a dagger-wielding enemy officer coughed up blood while laughing mockingly. It's a decoy. I know. Ingrid nodded, even as 2 arrows pierced his thigh. What? For more to go. What did you say? Focus. Focus. Was he failing because of his lack of focus? Perfect concentration was still beyond his reach. Ignoring the enemy officer's taunts, Ingrid summoned every bit of focus he could muster. With daring movements, he deflected enemy spears, dodging and counter-attacking with precision. His upward slash, far more refined than before, split an enemy's jaw, cleaving from mouth to nose. A bolt suddenly struck his side with a dull thud. Thanks to his armor, he wasn't fatally wounded, but 5 crossbowmen stood nearby, their weapons aimed. Around 80 enemies guarded the banner. It was an overwhelming number to face alone. I'll have to attack the flag while planning my retreat. He thought carefully, calculating his options. To break the flag, to achieve perfect focus, he needed to surpass death itself. The 3rd flag cost him 5 days. The 4th flag demanded 7. If I were the enemy commander? He would hide the final flag in the safest place. Before the mist could roll in, he spent 2 precious days scanning the enemy formation. And finally, he saw it. The unit protecting the last flag, hidden deep within their lines. This time, Ingrid warned his allies clearly and dashed forward. Everyone stayed low and kept their shields up. "Rem, follow me." He brought Rem along. "Follow you, what?" "Just follow me." Shouting, he sprinted forward, and Rem followed reluctantly. What insane plan is this? Instead of answering, Ingrid charged toward the flag-guarding unit with Rem at his side. Just the two of them. Enemy soldiers roared in fury. Ingrid skillfully shifted aside, using the mist for cover and leaving the brunt of the fight to Rem. "Who's casting the spell?" Rem's voice, cold as icy flames, rang out as he swung his axe. When Ingrid glanced back, he barely saw the axe before an enemy's head was sent flying. Blood sprayed like a fountain before the body crumpled to the ground. "I'll get answers from the next one." Rem unleashed his fury. While observing him, Ingrid mentally mapped the enemy's movements. It took 5 grueling days to reach the unit guarding the innermost banner. Using his wit, Ingrid avoided a head-on clash, sneaking around the side and keeping low. As he approached the banner stealthily, someone blocked his way. "Am I dreaming?" The man blocking him spoke. "Who was this guy?" "By the grace of the gods, my wish has been granted. I've wanted to kill you with my own hands." Ingrid tilted his head, unable to place the man. "Forgot me in just a few days." For this man, it had only been days, but for Ingrid, repeated battles had stretched this campaign into what felt like a year. "Apologies. Could you introduce yourself?" Ingrid asked politely, making veins bulge on the man's forehead. "Platoon leader of the Greyhounds, Mitch Hurrier." Even hearing the name, Ingrid drew a blank. "I see." Nodding, he further enraged Mitch, who glared daggers at him. "You bastard!" Seething, Mitch drew his sword. The sound of steel rang out as he pointed it at Ingrid. Something about it jogged Ingrid's memory. "Where did I see him?" "Wait a moment." Ingrid raised a hand, halting Mitch. "What is it?" "I truly don't remember." "Who are you again?" "You'll remember once I stab you." Mitch lunged at him, and Ingrid drew his longsword to meet him. Clang! Their blades clashed, the sound echoing as steel sang against steel. The two exchanged blows, and Mitch couldn't hide his surprise. "This bastard!" Ingrid's skills had grown immensely. Chapter 41, A Single Point of Focus. Chapter 41, A Single Point of Focus. Tat 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 tat. The blade pierced toward the eyes, slashed the shoulder, and then swept downward toward the thigh. Ingrid took everything in, the opponent's gestures, the movement of his hands and feet, and predicted the next attack. Matching his defense to the predicted trajectory, Ingrid successfully blocked each strike. Sparks flew between them, clearing a portion of the fog. Through it, his opponent's glowing eyes shone. The shoulder. The next attack aimed once again at his shoulder. Ingrid swiftly pulled his left foot, which was positioned half a step forward, back. His left shoulder tilted away just as the opponent's blade shot forward with ferocity. Rotating on his right big toe, he turned his body sideways, narrowly avoiding the strike. The sword brushed past his shoulder with a sharp whiz. Seizing the opportunity, Ingrid shifted into a modified middle stance. From this oblique posture, he swung his sword upward. In swordsmanship terms, the blade's edge facing the opponent is the front edge, and the one facing oneself is the back edge. Swinging upward from a lowered position brought the back edge into play. The back edge of Ingrid's sword targeted the opponent's jaw. Expecting his opponent to dodge, Ingrid thought to himself, "Even if he dodges, it'll create an opening." With this opening, he planned to guide the fight toward his intended conclusion, a skill honed through countless battles. A single step and a coordinated strike were enough to seize victory. "Cocky bastard!" Enraged, the opponent swung his sword horizontally instead of retreating after the thrust to Ingrid's shoulder. Ingrid ducked quickly to avoid the attack, abandoning his rising strike. Tat tat! Rather than follow through with his abandoned attack, Ingrid pulled his blade close to his body and raised it above his head to block the next strike. The opponent feigned the horizontal slash, instead lifting his sword and bringing it down in a vertical chop aimed at Ingrid's crown. Barely deflecting the blow, their swords locked. "Do you think you can take me down with just one step?" the opponent sneered as he pressed down from above. "Why, can't I?" Ingrid retorted, his voice calm yet sharp. The opponent, who had introduced himself as Mitch Hurrier, flared with anger. He had a knack for expressing his rage through his face alone, his emotions plain for all to see. "You really don't want to die peacefully, do you?" Nope. My wish is to grow old and die naturally. Incrid replied without missing a beat. When it came to provoking others, Incrid could hold his own against even REM. No, perhaps he was better at it. A thick vein throbbed visibly on Mitch's forehead. Fine. I'll cut off your limbs and throw you into a cesspool to live until you rot. Wrong again. I'll die of old age with my great-grandchildren by my side. You little. Thud. Mitch aimed a kick at Incrid, who countered it with his own foot. The clash forced both men to retreat, putting a two-step gap between them. Without hesitation, Incrid swung his sword to close the distance, while Mitch charged forward, relying on his speed. Mitch's rapid advance left a streak of afterimages, almost as if his body was tearing through space itself. Noting this, Incrid adjusted his sword's trajectory and brought it down in a diagonal slash. Clang! Their blades collided once more, the grinding of steel echoing as sparks flew. Incrid tried to push Mitch back with brute strength, but Mitch's sword clung to his like glue. In an instant, Mitch twisted his wrist, raising the tip of his blade toward Incrid's head. Using the stronger portion of his blade near the hilt, Mitch trapped Incrid's sword and shoved forward with precision, even as his ragged breaths betrayed his fury. Ting ting ting. The scraping of metal filled the air. If Incrid didn't act, his throat would be pierced. Mimicking Mitch's move, Incrid twisted his wrist and raised his sword. Ting! The locked blades parted, and sparks flew once again. Mitch immediately deflected Incrid's sword, forcing him to block the next relentless strike. This time, Incrid initiated the attack. From the upper right to the lower left, a diagonal slash. It was a textbook strike, polished through endless training and refined in countless battles. The flowing arc of the slash shone brilliantly as it descended toward Mitch. The step, the timing, the posture, and the strike all came together in perfect harmony. But Mitch intercepted the slash with his own blade. The moment their swords met, Incrid felt as if he had struck something soft, like cotton, rather than a blade. Mitch's sword deflected Incrid's strike with a gentle curve, then reversed direction. Its back edge now descended toward Incrid's head. Mitch traced a small circle with his wrist, redirecting the momentum effortlessly. Hup! Incrid inhaled sharply, realizing he had no time to block. He twisted his body to the side just in time to avoid the blow. Whoosh! Mitch's blade slashed through the space where Incrid's head had been, leaving him off balance. The next strike grazed Incrid's right forearm, leaving a shallow but bleeding wound. There was no time for words. The abdomen. Incrid deflected the thrust aimed at his gut, evaded the next diagonal slash targeting his thigh, and retaliated with a horizontal slash to create distance. But Mitch didn't relent. Instead of retreating, Mitch swung upward, closing the gap between them. Their swords danced in an intense exchange of blows. Incrid was forced into a defensive stance, barely managing to block and dodge each attack. Upper strike, diagonal, thrust. He poured everything he had into his movements, the foundation of his training, honed through battles. He slashed, thrust, retreated, and pressed forward. He even used his feet when necessary. But Mitch read every move, blocking or evading as needed, leaving Incrid with only minor opportunities. The wounds on Incrid's body accumulated, his arm, shoulder, and thigh all bore cuts. His movement slowed as the injuries piled up. Even his helmet was knocked off, a strike grazing his forehead and leaving a bleeding gash. Blood streamed from his forehead, splattering with each movement. The shoulder. There was no time to breathe or think, only to react, defend, and counter. Incrid managed to land a few strikes, but only at the cost of taking several himself. Still, he remained focused. Each breath was a fight for survival. Mitch, too, felt the strain. When Mitch first encountered this madman attacking their camp, he thought him unskilled. The man's limits were obvious even after a few exchanges. But now, in just a few days, this same man had grown so much that Mitch wondered if he was even the same person. Is he a twin? Distracted by the thought, Mitch almost paid dearly when Incrid's blade narrowly missed piercing his throat. This bastard! Shaking off the distraction, Mitch focused entirely on killing his opponent. And so did Incrid. They were locked in a deadly rhythm, evade, block, counter. Openings appeared but were too dangerous to exploit. Hesitating in this battle was akin to boarding the ferryman's boat on the river of death. But even if he were to die today, Incrid resolved to live each moment with purpose. That was why each passing day mattered more. The chest. No, the abdomen. Ingrid evaded a deceptive thrust. He deflected and diverted the blade, which fell from above like an eagle swooping down. The deflection was clumsy, lacking refinement. It was closer to blocking than truly diverting. Ingrid's use of the heavy sword style relied heavily on overpowering the opponent with raw strength. In contrast, he occasionally mixed in precise sword styles and flowing techniques. The precise sword style followed strict patterns, cornering the opponent into counterable situations. The flowing sword style, on the other hand, diverted attacks to create openings. Clang. Blades met, emitting a heated resonance. Ingrid was fully focused, unable to let his guard down for even a moment. Even a blink could spell defeat. In this exchange of blows, nothing else mattered. Thoughts of flags, victory, or swordsmanship evaporated. All that remained was the act of slashing, thrusting, and swinging at the opponent before him. The world faded, leaving only one thing, the sword and himself and the sword. The opponent's blade, the sword, and the opponent. Eventually, even himself and his opponent disappeared. Lost in the moment, Ingrid achieved a state of selflessness. Only the sword remained. The rhythm of swinging, cutting, thrusting, blocking, and evading filled every fiber of Ingrid's being. An endless euphoria rose, fueling an insatiable desire. Clang! Clang! Clink! Bang! Sheeing. Steel met steel in countless variations, each clash producing a symphony of noise. But nothing lasts forever. Knowing this, Ingrid thought, just a little longer. He instinctively understood that this wasn't a moment that could easily be recreated. He had felt this once before, cleanly cutting through an opponent without resistance. It was a perfect strike, an experience he had spent years trying to replicate without success. Even now, while he wished this moment would last forever, he knew it wouldn't. Bang! A heavy sword strike descended, imbued with Ingrid's full intent. His opponent skillfully diverted the force, creating an opening in Ingrid's guard. Thud! The opponent didn't miss. A blade, like a heated skewer, pierced Ingrid's chest. Phew! With a sword embedded in his chest, Ingrid's arms stopped. His limbs trembled from the strain of full exertion. Lowering his weapon with trembling hands, Ingrid looked up to see his opponent, drenched in sweat. I remember now, Ingrid said, blood trickling from his lips. Finally. You're the guy from the fire, aren't you? Being struck seemed to jog his memory. The encounter had been memorable. Mitch Hurrier, platoon leader of the Aspen Principality. Ingrid, squad leader of the Norilia Kingdom. Both men were drenched in blood and sweat, as though caught in a storm. They stared at each other in silence. For the first time, Ingrid felt no animosity toward the man who had stabbed him. He only yearned to fight him again. Mitch's face remained stoic, but his eyes betrayed a change. The rage had subsided, replaced by something indescribable. The dream is over, Mitch said. A dream? Oh. It was a lie. What kind of swordsman wishes to die of old age? Right. Now die already. With that, Mitch withdrew his blade. The searing pain spread, making Ingrid's mind go blank. He dropped to one knee, blood pouring from his mouth. Is it an enemy attack? Aspen soldiers had encircled them. One of them stepped closer, speaking. When did they get here? Ingrid glanced around. The area was swarming with enemies. Yes, he slipped into strike from behind. It seems he's skilled in ambush tactics. Pity, isn't it, platoon leader? No, it isn't. Mitch stared at Ingrid. Truthfully, he felt a pang of regret. Finding an opponent of this caliber was rare. The fight had brought him to a realm he had never experienced before. Regret was inevitable. Yet, Ingrid's expression was devoid of such emotions. Instead, he looked relieved, like a child holding a wooden sword for the first time. What are you? Mitch asked, confused. But Ingrid wasn't listening anymore. He was dying, and a single thought consumed him. Ragnar, you fool. It's not the fear of death you need. What was necessary wasn't the intensity of near-death focus but an opponent who could push you to your limits, someone who could elevate your skills and emotions through mutual risk. A true rival. In that sense, Mitch Hurrier was perfect. He was a rival worthy of the title. As Ingrid lay dying, he realized this. The sensations and clarity he had experienced moments ago were what Ragnar referred to as a single point of focus. He had achieved it. And he now knew he could chase that experience again. That fleeting moment could be recreated, though it wouldn't be easy. Mitch Hurrier's existence made it possible. Knowing this, how could he not smile? Seeing the path ahead, Ingrid died with a grin. Was he insane? Mitch could only tilt his head, puzzled by the sight of Ingrid smiling in death. Chapter 42, A Stroke of Luck. Chapter 42, A Stroke of Luck. Ragnar, while discussing the single-focus poing technique, asked, "Are you going to learn it?" "Of course." Ingrid didn't hesitate. When did he become this skilled? The foundational techniques of the Northern-style greatsword were solidly ingrained in him. Not merely as postures learned by swinging in empty air but honed through combat, seamlessly integrated into his body. Impressive. The squad leader was a truly fascinating individual. Just yesterday, he had relied primarily on the Valen-style mercenary swordsmanship. Today, however, he displayed a rock-solid foundation. "Where did you learn your swordsmanship?" "It cost a lot of money." He hinted at having trained under a swordsmanship instructor. It must have been a fortune, thought Ragnar. That much was evident. Even if he had personally intervened, the results wouldn't have been better than this. Thus, it made sense to teach him beyond the basics, hence the introduction of the concentrated point technique. Still, Ragnar harbored doubts as he explained it. Learning doesn't mean mastering. Although he had developed the technique, it was originally a secret passed down within his family. Naturally, he hadn't revealed the technique in its pure form, he'd modified and refined it before teaching. So, calling it his creation wasn't entirely inaccurate. Not that I've ever seen anyone succeed. In all his years wandering the continent, Ragnar had encountered fewer than 5 individuals who could enter the state of absolute concentration. More like 3, he corrected himself. Of the supposed 5, 2 had merely stumbled upon success by sheer luck, like arrows hitting a wolf's head by accident. Only 3 had truly mastered it. Achieving this level of focus required talent, a rare gift. Forgetting one's surroundings and immersing oneself completely wasn't an easy task. This ability wasn't limited to swordsmanship. Scholars in their fields, for instance, displayed such focus when studying and learning. Those truly skilled could even consciously put themselves in such a state when needed. However, achieving such focus during a battle was an entirely different challenge. It's near impossible. Even Ragnar, who had mastered concentrated point, did so only after a significant ordeal. Ingrid wouldn't find it easy. Yet the glimmer in Ingrid's eyes told a different story. "Aren't you going to explain?" "Skip the basics, I already understand those. Just teach me that you concentrated point." How could someone be so steadfast? Ragnar felt as though he were gazing at a mighty tree, one that stood tall against typhoons and lightning strikes, unmoving and unyielding. Despite the technique being akin to chasing clouds, the squad leader declared he would learn it, nodding as if he already grasped its essence. It almost seemed believable. Ingrid had always been sincere, whether training, swinging his sword, or tackling any task head-on with his best effort. Perhaps that dedication was why Ragnar decided to teach him. "I think I get it," said Ingrid. Ragnar nodded, though he suspected Ingrid might have misunderstood. It was an encouraging nod. Ragnar was well aware of the limits of talent. Most geniuses never look down to see the ground beneath their feet, but Ragnar had wandered the continent, observing the struggles of those below. He had ventured underground, conversed with its dwellers, and crossed blades with them. Talent. How many had fallen victim to those 2 syllables? The squad leader would likely be no different, it was the natural order of things. Yet his refusal to give up inspired Ragnar. It was selfish, but Ingrid's determination allowed Ragnar to keep walking his own path. Thus, he resolved to teach him with all his might. Forget your surroundings, forget yourself, and focus solely on what remains. That's our concentrated point. It's similar to how people say their past flashes before their eyes in life-threatening moments. That experience could be a useful reference. "I see." "Got it," Ingrid replied. Strangely, he seemed to brush off the explanation. That's not like him. He wasn't someone to give up because he thought something was impossible. Despite Ragnar's attempts to push Ingrid into a state of focus, by using his sword to heighten the tension, Ingrid failed to achieve it. "All right, let's go." Still, Ingrid stepped onto the battlefield with a bright expression. Seeing this, Ragnar felt a surge of motivation. Guess I'll put in some real effort today. Ordinarily, Ragnar would have lazily swung his sword, embodying the stereotype of a lethargic genius. But not today. Ingrid watched Ragnar with a calm gaze. What's gotten into him? Well, taking the fight seriously wasn't a bad thing. Leaving the determined Ragnar behind, Ingrid focused on his own actions. Another day had begun. Ragnar's training method for concentrated point was flawed. Or rather, the method, developed and mastered by a natural genius, didn't suit him. Then is my way correct? Only time would tell. What's the solution? I'll test it. Ingrid moved along a familiar route, directing allies to take positions with shields and calling for REM. REM. Who's there, shaman? REM, busy deciphering enemy sorcery, seemed agitated. Follow me. Ingrid tapped REM on the shoulder. Who? Charge. What? Squad leader, are you crazy? Despite his words, REM followed. Unexpectedly, Ragnar joined as well. Is this a charge? If we're breaking the enemy vanguard, I'm in. What's wrong with both of you? REM muttered, but Ragnar ignored him and charged ahead. Though the area was shrouded in mist, it barely hindered their movements. REM moved like a storm, dual axes crushing everything in his path. He seemed ready to mow down an entire infantry unit of 80 soldiers alone. Ragnar resembled a massive battering ram, demolishing the infantry line as if it were a castle wall. Slow yet unrelenting, he showed no mercy, cutting down everything, from flying bolts to incoming spears, with a single arming sword. At least high tier. In the Norilia kingdom, high tier referred to soldiers surpassing the advanced level. Above high tier lay peak tier and then top tier. Or perhaps peak tier. Ingrid wasn't sure of his own level yet, making it harder to gauge theirs. Regardless, this wasn't the time for idle speculation. Following the same route, Ingrid confronted Mitch Hurrier. Let's settle this. This time, he initiated the challenge. Mitch, momentarily surprised, laughed. You're insane, walking to your death like this. He wasn't wrong. Killing Mitch wouldn't guarantee survival. But it didn't matter. Ingrid wasn't here to die, he was here to give his all. You came for me? Unbelievable. This is a first. Mitch seemed genuinely baffled. Why? Is this your first time being confessed to? I fell for you at first sight, Ingrid joked. Mitch chuckled but quickly narrowed his eyes. My squad, the Greyhounds, are relentless pursuers. It's been ages since someone pursued me first. Feeling left out? Should I hide so you can hunt me down? Enough nonsense. Mitch charged. Ingrid steadied his breathing, trying to enter a focused state. He failed. The fight ended quickly. Mitch outclassed him in skill, willpower, and talent. A single technique wasn't enough to challenge such an opponent. What made you think you could take me on? How did you even get this far? Ingrid's lungs and intestines were shredded by Mitch's blade. His insides felt as though hot coals had been shoved into them, a searing, unbearable pain. I trusted myself. I made a mistake this time, but I'll get it right next time. Reliving the same day wouldn't make repeating this experience any easier. What? Next time, I'll succeed. Just as he had once entered a focused state and attained enlightenment, Ingrid now felt a faint glimmer of realization. Even if I let you go, you'll die. What's the next move? Isn't he insane? Don't engage, platoon leader. Swish! One of the enemy soldiers beside him drew his sword and pressed it against Ingrid's neck. Without waiting, Ingrid twisted his neck, letting the blade cut deep into him. Rip! The blade had been sharpened well, leaving a searing pain as a deep wound opened on his neck. The agony from his neck and stomach flared simultaneously, a pain so intense it felt like death itself. Barely holding on, enduring what felt like the threshold of death, Ingrid opened his mouth. See you again. Leaving those final words, he bled out and died. The day began anew. Ingrid sought out Mitch Hurrier again. Nice to see you, my friend. You came looking for me, didn't you? Yep. That's right. I'm here for you, the tenacious lover and Greyhound platoon leader. Let's have a go. You're out of your mind. They clashed again. This time, Ingrid realized his mistake. You can't force it. If you think too hard about focusing, you end up trapped in those thoughts. Then what's the answer? It's simple, go back to the beginning. Move with the opponent's blade, let your sword match their rhythm as if in a dance. Fight and fight again. It took 18 resets of the day using the same approach. Only then did Ingrid manage to regain that state of focus. It was such an overwhelming joy that even as one arm was severed and he fell to the ground, he couldn't help but smile. The joy eclipsed the pain. You're smiling? Seeing this, Mitch swung his blade, ending it. Another reset. And so it went, again and again, until success. If someone had been watching, they'd call him relentless, tenacious beyond measure. But for Ingrid, this wasn't about persistence. Entering that state of focus, perfecting his swordsmanship through real combat against a worthy opponent, was pure satisfaction. After 28 iterations of today, Ingrid had a grasp of focus. After 48 iterations, he could summon a pinpoint focus deliberately. After 94 iterations, he could call upon that focus whenever he wanted. A perfect focus. It was complete control over his sword and body. With that achieved, his strength was paired with finesse. Once he had mastered pinpoint focus, he took it a step further. Teach me. He returned to Ragnar to learn more. When he demonstrated his newly honed focus, Ragnar frowned. What's this? Why? It feels like you've already learned this somewhere. But this isn't something that can just be taught. Are you a genius? A genius? He'd had the sheer luck of grueling experience and over 100 repetitions to finally ingrain it. Ingrid knew he lacked natural talent, but he didn't dwell on it. All he felt was joy in the moment. And so, repeating today again, he replied with words that now felt second nature. Just lucky. You call this luck? Ragnar was incredulous. Watching him, Ingrid realized it was time to leave this endless loop. Having distilled the essence of pinpoint focus, he feigned being a genius and, after leaving Ragnar with this impression, turned away. Where are you going? To see the company commander. Ragnar didn't stop him. He couldn't help but marvel at the uncanny precision Ingrid displayed, like a meticulously crafted sculpture made from endless effort, not something grasped at a glance. How is that even possible? Pondering, Ragnar soon dismissed the thought. There was no answer to be found in idle musings. Better to leave it alone. Watching the captain like that was enough to ignite his own determination. Ingrid, noticing the renewed fire in Ragnar's eyes, thought to himself, at least today's given him some motivation. I need to focus on my own task. There was no time to dwell on Ragnar. In this battle, no matter what, their side would face near total annihilation unless two things happened. First, the mist of massacre had to be lifted. Second, the Allied forces needed to take cover while the fog cleared. Both couldn't be done at once. Ingrid had only one body. Breaking the enemy's flagpole was just one problem. Even after a surprise attack, he'd have to escape the heart of enemy territory. He had no intention of being trapped in today. He would break through the enemy's strategy and shatter it completely. I need to see the company commander. He approached the 4th platoon leader. Now. With the approaching battle palpable, the entire unit's nerves were taut. Asking to meet the company commander now was bound to raise eyebrows. The platoon leader, reclining on a field bed with his spear leaned against the tent wall, stood up. Yes, now. Why? I remembered something from our last reconnaissance mission. The 4th platoon leader studied Ingrid carefully before nodding. Cracking sounds came from his knees as he stretched, then he asked. What is it? It seems the aspen is hiding something, a curse. A curse? Yes. The platoon leader hesitated, skeptical, before recalling that Ingrid wasn't one to spout nonsense. He quickened his steps. If something needed saying, it had to be said. Judgment would be up to the company commander. Soon, they arrived at the commander's tent. You wanted to see me? The green-eyed fairy commander asked. The tent was cozy, with a short torch crackling softly. Ingrid nodded. Yes. What is it? The fairy's tone was cold, suggesting this had better be important. A curse. Ingrid didn't mince words. A curse. A flagpole and flag, along with someone in the enemy ranks, a shaman. Thanks to the countless repetitions of today, Ingrid's memories were clear, though faint. He adjusted his words slightly to make his claim persuasive. If this wasn't convincing, he'd simply try again. That's the privilege of someone who repeats today. Fortunately, the fairy commander listened intently. Tell me more. Of course. He explained, hearing enemy soldiers shouting about their shaman. The fairy commander's eyes gleamed. Ingrid avoided mentioning the mist, that would be too much. Curses were secretive arts, rarely shared beyond their practitioners. Recognizing one at a glance was implausible. He stopped there. The rest was up to the commander's judgment. Returning to his position at the front line, Ingrid prepared himself. It was time to surpass Mitch Hurrier and break the flagpole. This is as far as I can go. The rest was up to the leadership. Who? Now was the time to break free from today's loop.